Okay, so I want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and actually the recording will be available to you on the event website. You can use the link that you used today to enter the event, and it will be available for up to 30 days. And I hope that you will actually share the recording with anyone you think might benefit from watching it as well. Please feel free to do that. I want to introduce myself. I'm Cheryl Corlitz, the Director of Gap Year Recruitment for Masa North America. And part of what I do is I help people choose their gap year in Israel. So I'm going to put my information in the chat in a little bit. So you will have it and you can reach out to me at any time in the process, whether you are looking for a specific program or just want to talk about gap year in general. So I also will be putting in the website link to masaisrael.org because we don't have time today to talk about individual programs, and the best place to find out about all the programs is on our website. So I'm going to put that into the chat as well. So let's get started. At Masa, we know that taking a gap year is not the expected path for most North American high school graduates. There has always been a rush to get to college, and I think in our country, we often judge success by how quickly we get things done. But the past 2 years have inspired so many of us, including high school students, to reassess our life choices. And taking a gap year has become a more popular and viable choice for many more high school seniors. Masa has been offering gap year programs in Israel for Jewish teens for over a decade, and we know what a life-changing experience this can be. And that inspired today's panel. This is a new event for us. After listening to the questions and concerns of high schoolers and their parents about gap year, we wanted to help in the most meaningful and impactful way. Hearing statistics and facts are not necessarily that helpful, though. So we feel that hearing from people who are like you and were recently in your shoes making this decision, that could really make a world of difference. So we are so glad you could join us for today's conversation. We hope it gives you the answers to all of your questions. I want to start today by introducing the moderator of our panel, Noah Kaplan. He's the Director of Academic Recruitment for Masa North America. He is also a Masa alumnus, and I will let him take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As Cheryl mentioned, my name is Noah. I'm the Director of Academic Recruitment, so overseeing study abroad graduate school programs. Also, I am a Masa alumni. I did the Masa Teaching Fellowship, so I was teaching English in Israel for 10 years. I did not do a gap year, but unfortunately, I didn't know much about it, and you all are in a better position than I am right now, just being aware. Basically, we've got 4 wonderful gap year alumni here with us today that are going to talk about their experiences, answer some questions. We strongly encourage everyone to ask their own questions. So you can put them in either the Zoom chat or in the chat on the Excel events page. So we'll get to those questions either right away if it's relevant to what we're talking about, or later on in the session, but we'll get to all of your questions unless they're about we're not looking for questions about specific programs, because there's so many different programs and not everyone is interested in every single different program. So if you have any questions about their experience or just anything relating to what we're talking about, then please ask your questions, and I'll get to them as we're going along. So start off, I'll have our alumni introduce themselves. We've got Ariana, Becca, Joshua, and Ari. So start off, Ariana, if you want to introduce yourself, just a little bit, where you're from, where you went to college, or where you're going to college, and what program you went on.
Hi, I'm Ariana. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I'm currently at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Last year, I was a participant on the Chavruta Hartman Institute Gap Year program.
Great. Becca, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Becca. I am from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And last year, I was on the Nativ Gap Year in Israel. And now I am a first year at the joint program with Columbia University and the Jewish Theological Seminary.
All right, Joshua.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joshua. I'm from Chicago. And 2 years ago, I went on Big Idea Gap Year in Israel and the Aardvark Summer Program. And I'm currently at the University of Chicago.
And Ari.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Ari. I'm from Long Island, New York. Last year I was on a gap year with Young Judea Year course, and now I'm at Northeastern in Boston.
Great. Yeah, and also I forgot to mention I'm also from Chicago, so we've got a lot of Chicago representation in here, which is awesome. Yeah, all right, so let's get started. Yeah, I'm just gonna bring up some talking points, and whoever wants to, answer can jump in, and we can just keep the conversation flowing. So, we'll start off with when did you realize that you wanted to do a gap year? Is this always something that you were interested in, or what was the timeline like for you?
I'm happy to start talking. So I always knew that I wanted to go to Israel for a year in between high school and college, but really didn't understand how I would be able to make that work. I didn't know so much about gap years. I went to a public high school, so I found myself doing some research and stumbled across Masa essentially. And even though I knew that I wanted to go to Israel, like I said before, I was really able to just kind of explore on the website, and I picked a few programs that looked interesting to me and ended up reaching out through my local Jewish community to see if anyone knew any other information.
I can add on.
So,
I grew up in the Young Judea system. I went to all the summer camps for 10 years, and Young Judea Year course was kind of the continuation on of Young Judea. But I never really thought that I was going to do it because I was trying to play soccer in college, so it was never really a possibility for me that I thought of. And then one thing led to another, and then my senior year, I kind of, with COVID and other circumstances, I just decided to do this in Israel, do the gap year.
So I thought when I was in elementary school, I thought that everyone went on a gap year before college. Turns out that is not actually what happens, but I had it in my mind that that's what I was going to do. But for me, a lot of the decision was which program I wanted to do. And that was a big part of figuring out what my journey would look like.
So for me, I did not want to do a gap year until midway through my senior year. And I sort of just realized that there was really no rush for me to get to college, and that I could have this awesome experience that you can really only have in between high school and college when you have no other responsibilities. And I was sort of convinced, I'm glad that I decided to take a gap year in Israel.
Yeah, Joshua, at what point in the process of looking for colleges did you make that did you realize that was an option, and then fully make that decision to commit to that?
All right, so I'd gotten into Chicago EA, so around December, and then I decided to go on a gap year in March or April.
Okay.
And so really towards the end, I made the decision to go on the gap year. And
right. Yeah. That's one of the great things about the gap year programs, is it's so flexible in terms of when you can apply. You can decide at the beginning, you can decide when you're a sophomore in high school that you want to do a gap year, and that's your plan all along, or you can decide, right up before you're supposed to go off to college. So it's just really flexible. So yeah, it's kind of going off of that topic. One big reason why people are hesitant to do a gap year is that they feel that they're missing out on the classic American college experience, where you graduate college, then you go, or graduate high school, you go right off to college. And if you do a gap year, it's kind of it's different. It's you feel like you're missing out on something. You're late to your college experience. So what was your to anyone, what was your experience in that sense? Did you feel like you were missing out, and how did that kind of play into starting college late?
I can go.
Go for it, Ariana.
Go, Aria.
So I had a very surreal moment when I got to college campus this year, that I was walking around and like living my college life. And I was like, wow, if this was the only context understanding of life that I had, like I would not have understood a gap year at all. And it's just a vastly different world. But being on a gap year gives you so much time to grow as a person and like live life without the responsibilities of school, that like when you get to college you're so much more prepared and ready and like able to embrace every opportunity. So like there were maybe 2 moments in Israel where I was like, oh man, I'm not in college, and then I'd like jump on a bus and go to the shuk, and like really wasn't feeling that college like need while I was there. And then being back and like getting to college made me appreciate it all the more so.
Yeah, I think for me, because the culture in Israel and just living in the Middle East in general is so vastly different than the US, that just having experience with other culture and then coming back, it just gives you way more perspective into what you want to put your time into in college. And I think you learn a lot about yourself from learning about another culture.
Definitely building off of what Ari was saying about just like gaining perspective. I think all of like being a young adult means trying to figure out like who you are as a person and what your interests are. And college is a really, really great place to explore that. But I think also it can be really daunting and difficult for some people to just kind of jump right into that. So having a year in between where the goal of the year is for you to develop as a person, and you're really just exploring and learning new things about Israel, you're experiencing a different culture, you're hearing a new language every day, and it kind of just like helps you become a more mature and self-assured person. And I really, really feel that. And I also think just because of our generation and the way that we have dealt with the pandemic in terms of timing, we've all sort of been able to realize a little bit more that just because there's a conventional way to do something does not mean that that's the way things are going to happen for you. And I think just because it's expected to go to college right after you graduate doesn't mean that it's better in any way.
Yeah, so I want to speak to the social like aspect of missing out. So it was actually kind of funny. The University of Chicago has like a housing system where they put students in houses. And in my house, there are about 7 or 8 other Jews who went on gap years. So I actually like, kind of worked out with the same age wise, but it's not really that big of a difference. And you meet people throughout your college experience. And I've met people throughout my college experience. And like I'm friends with some of them. And some of them, like you meet them in orientation week and they eventually peter off. It's a whole cycle of who you really just finding who your friend group is. And that can happen immediately, like regardless of whether you want a gap year or not, or it can happen halfway through. So if you're always open to meeting new people, and actually the gap year helped me with that because I was sort of forced into this condition where I didn't know. I went on a small gap year with 12 people and I didn't know any of them to begin with, but at the end we all came out best friends. And so really that experience helped me to make friends at the university because it's sort of like a practice, not a practice, but like you get practice at making new friends because you're used to the same friends from high school, from elementary school, from middle school throughout that time. And so it really helped me to make new friends.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua. That's kind of also going into Michelle's question about kind of that transition. It's a much different transition from someone coming right out of high school and being, having the same, transition as most of the other freshmen in college while you're coming in and coming in with a completely different experience right before college. So what was that? Was that transition troubling at all? Or you feel a little, just feel different than other freshmen coming in? Was it difficult at all?
I think at least for me, so at Columbia University, there's a college within the school called General Studies, and it's essentially for people who have an unconventional path to college, but are still like within the university. So there are a lot of people who are veterans. There are a lot of people who did study abroad or gap year programs and for a few years or worked and then decided to go to college. And so being able to just kind of like see that experience like within my freshman experience, and like there are freshmen at Columbia University that are 23 years old, and we're all just kind of able to come together and hang out. And I think it's a really special experience. And it also made me realize that it doesn't really matter how old you are when starting school. And I think we've all had a freshman experience, and it's been a really special thing.
I think just
I,
to tell,
I just wanted to respond. I mean, I'm not on the panel, but I'm sort of on the panel, right? But I was thinking just about what you just said and what Joshua said. And I just want to tell you that I'm a lot older than you guys, and I still remember the first week of college going into the cafeteria and not knowing a soul on campus and literally saying to myself, oh my gosh, I'm like starting a whole new life. I still remember that. So Joshua, absolutely. Like it is when you're on a gap year, it sort of gives you those skills because you all are together anyway. But this is bringing all back those memories. But I'm going to let you keep talking.
I'm just gonna answer just a personal story. My friends in high school were vastly different from the kinds of friends that I have now in college, just in my first semester or first year of college. And I think that it's 100% due to the gap year. I mean, obviously I was a big part of that change, but the gap year gave me the time to figure out myself and who I wanted to surround myself with. And I think that there are going to be more immature kids your freshman year when you go to a college, but there are also really mature kids as well that you will find after you come back from college. Like you're not going to be like the older one. You're not going to feel like you're like that much older than everybody that's a freshman at the college now.
So I have found being on a gap year to be really beneficial because my roommate was on another gap year program, and like that's how we found each other. A lot of my like initial first day friends, we were bonded over the fact that we all took gap years. So it was like a nice thing connecting me to other people. But then also like one of my really, really close friends from right off the bat didn't take a gap year. And like there are some people that you really just couldn't tell, and like they were super mature even for being straight from high school. And then also you're just friends with people in different grades, like a lot more so than in high school. The grades really don't matter, and you can be friends with a junior or senior, and it's just like everyone is experiencing college together.
Yeah, I'll kind of go on to the next point, playing off of that. Another difference between going right into college and doing a gap year is a lot of times when when students go off to college, they're doing so with a couple friends. They're going in, or at least with some people from their high school that they know and that they're comfortable with. Whereas if you go on a gap year, most of the time you're going in not really knowing anyone, and that can be scary to step out of your comfort zone and have this experience kind of which might seem like having this experience on your own. So was this something that you guys were experiencing going in, and how did you kind of combat that?
I mean, I can say for my own, the gap year that I went on was, like I said, a continuation of Young Judea. So I did know a good amount of people on the program, but there were definitely a lot of people that didn't know anybody going on, and there was an adjustment period, especially because a lot of your course kids were young Judeans. so they did know each other. But I think after a couple weeks, it was like they kind of found their people, and that first level of separation kind of faded.
Yeah, to speak on to Ari's point, I think on my gap year, there were only 12 of us, and none of us, there were only 2 kids who knew each other going in. And like sort of for the first month, we were all figuring like each other out and getting to know each other. But really, the sort of necessitates like becoming friends with the people that you want to become friends with, and finding like what you want in a friend and like who you want to be friends with. And so I think at the beginning it can be daunting because you're in a whole new country. I had friends who went on gap years, but I was only on my gap year and we were in a different city than everyone else. And so like it was a little scary, but I think over time you get to know your people. I got to know my roommates, like best friends with them. And so it's just it seems like when I came in, I built it up to be more of an issue in my head, but everybody else is coming in with the same like logic. They're all coming into the same situation. Like they also don't have any friends, and so it sort of works out.
Also, just like a little story that I was thinking about in terms of like meeting people and like being in a situation where like all of your friends already did the freshman experience, like you're going to be a first year and you feel like you don't know anyone because of it. When I was in Israel last year, Masa, basically when you're on your gap year, Masa gives out these backpacks. They're incredible backpacks and they're really big and they hold a lot of stuff, and they have a huge Masa logo just like on the backpack. And we all got them for free while we were on our gap year programs. And so while I was in Israel, you can spot Masa participants throughout the entire country. And we would sometimes just like be on a bus in Jerusalem or like Haifa or like really anywhere and see someone with a Masa backpack and start chatting with them. And I vividly remember talking to a girl who was wearing a Masa backpack, and I just approached her and was like, I like your bag. And it turns out that she was also going to college in New York City next year. And we started texting, and now I'm friends with her in the city. And so I think it's really cool that because of the network that Masa's created, I felt less alone going into college from my Israel experience.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to kind of address Robin's question sort of about freedom. When you go to college, it's sort of this new sense of freedom that you've never had before. You've been living under your parents' roof for 18 years, and now you're under nobody's roof, and so it's a sense of freedom. Kind of how does that sense kind of compare and contrast to the freedom that you have on a gap year program, in terms of just the general sense feeling of freedom, and also in terms of specifically your freedom on the gap year program to explore Israel and to kind of learn about yourself as well?
I can start with this one. So I really think the gap year is a good like stepping stone, because when you get to college, like you're really thrown in and like a lot of freedom in a different way. But the structure that a gap year provides, where every gap year, I think, has like directors who are in charge of it and counselors who are there to support you and plan different things, or like some type of teacher model where you're not just thrown into a new country on your own. You have freedom to plan what you want to, like some weekends, or what you want to do in a day, or like be responsible for your laundry. But you also have the structure that like if you're freaking out, there's someone there who's checking in on you all the time and there to support you. So it's a good balance of like actually having freedom, but also not like left all alone.
Yeah, sort of to bounce off of that point, like in both sides. So when I was on my second half of my gap year, I was interning for a high frequency trading firm in Herzliya. I was in Tel Aviv, and so I had to come on to work on time every day. I had a schedule and a commute and plan everything so that I could be prepared. And so that really forced me to become a scheduler. I was never a scheduler beforehand. Like I would sort of just like go to school, then hang out with friends, or go to a sports team. And so I never really had to build my own schedule. And this sort of forced me to build my own schedule. And that skill has become really useful in college because like, yeah, I have like a daily planner. Like I plan every day and it keeps me organized. And I find that when I plan my day, like because I learned that skill on my gap year, plan my day, and I'm able to perform better as a college student. And also in terms of like the freedom in Israel and traveling around. So every weekend my roommates and I would travel to like a new city in the area. We were based in Beersheba. So one weekend we went to Ashkelon, went to Ashdod. We got to really explore the different areas. Got to see family friends over Shabbats for the holidays. And so like I really got to see the whole entire state of Israel throughout my gap year. And I thought that was just an amazing experience to be able to hop on a bus and with my friends and just rent an Airbnb or a hotel room and experience and explore a new city. So there definitely was that time on the weekends that we got to explore in the program as like trip Thursdays where they would take us to like something cool that you wouldn't really go to on a major trip to Israel with your school or with a program, sort of like an unknown gem or hidden gem. And so that really gives you the chance to explore a lot of different things.
I think with your courses would say is more hands-off, but they are there for any support that you need. So for example, in Tel Aviv, if you wanted something more structured, you can find an internship. And also Young Judea also has a good network of internships in the area as well. But so you can either do that and have an internship 5 times a week and then have the weekends free and you know have be working in an internship where in a field that you're interested in from like whatever 10 to 4 p.m. or you can decide to work in a school and have less hours and then have more time to travel through the country. My favorite memories from your course are personally like planning impromptu, but just going on very spontaneous trips to like the desert and then camping with some friends, like or like deciding to take a bus up to Akko for the day or something like that. Those are my favorite parts of the gap year, and I think like depending on which program you want, you can either choose to have it more structured or you can have it or choose to kind of manifest more for yourself.
I want to, like, before you go, Ari, I want to ask you a question, something you mentioned, because you talked about your internship. So we didn't really get to that, but since you mentioned it, I'm wondering, did you know, like, was the internship based on what you think you want to major in college or what you think you want to do for a career? Or was it completely random? And do you think it helped you in any way for choosing what to do in the future?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people that did do internships that they are now studying in college. Like there's good computer science. I know a friend that did a really good computer science internship and now he's majoring in computer science. I know somebody that worked for a television show and now they're in like communications at college. Personally, I did Magen David Adom. So I volunteered on an ambulance about 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm not interested in medicine at all, but I just thought it would be a very, very cool experience. And it was a very cool experience. I'm not into medicine. I know that now. So I think that's just as valuable that I know what I don't want than maybe something that, you know, I'd pursue in college.
It's actually really interesting because one of my friends in college now who went on Becca's program was interested in like, I think he wanted to be a pilot, like planes. And then he worked on the ambulance with Masa. And then now he's like at EMS, all of this medical stuff, like gonna grow up and be a doctor and save the world. And like, he found that because of what he did on the Masa program.
Yeah, great. All right, I'm just gonna kind of transition into answering a question from the chat from earlier, just so to make sure we get it in. There's so many GAP programs through Masa. May have been a little overwhelming when looking through which programs to do. So kind of what was that decision-making process like? How did you decide which program to go on?
I think the first thing that someone told me, and that was really helpful for me in the decision process because it can be very overwhelming, is to know that there are going to be multiple programs that will be a good fit for you. I think I went on Native and I would have been happy if I did a few other programs. But for me, in the deciding process, I wanted to be able to have some sort of like formal learning opportunity. And I also wanted to have time to explore. And so the way that my program specifically is structured is the first semester, you can either choose to take classes for credit at Hebrew University or to participate in a Jewish learning opportunity. And then the second half of the semester, you're volunteering, and we move from Jerusalem to the north. And so I like the idea of being able to move places. I think for me, it was nice to have that change of scenery. And I think also to have those two different experiences and combine that into one whole gap year.
And then I wanted to stay in one place. So like where that was something you were looking for. I was looking at Chavruta and Nativ for a while. And it really came down to a lot of my friends were going on Nativ and I would know a lot of people versus Chavruta, which I really didn't know anyone. But there was this aspect of it's half American, half Israeli. And that really drew me because I wanted to be in a program with Israelis, seeing the country through their eyes. So like I took a leap, took a risk and went with the program that I didn't know anyone. And it definitely was amazing. And like, I know I would have loved Nativ if that was my decision. So it's nice to know that both routes would have been good.
Like I said before, I was a Young Judea baby, so I just continued with Young Judea. But just to speak on like the structure of how it works, we start in Jerusalem and we do a lot of like geopolitical courses on in Israel and in the Middle East and with the West Bank and whatever. And I think like for me, learning and taking classes in that first semester really gave me a good base of where I was. And that was really important for me to understand what's going on in the country that I'm living in. And as well as geopolitical stuff, we also did some Jewish studies as well. So for me, being able to take classes at least for half of the time was very, very important for me going forward in that year.
Awesome. And just one more question from earlier in the chat, just to make sure we get it in. Maybe Joshua, you can answer this because I know you were already accepted into the University of Chicago before your gap year. So once you realized you wanted to go on a gap year and started that, did you need to reapply or defer from college? What was that process like?
Yeah, so I just emailed my admissions officer and told her that I was doing a gap year. And she sent me the deferral form. I filled it out, and then I deferred my admissions for a year, and everything was all kosher. So for me, in my case, I didn't need to reapply. Also, on my gap year specifically, there were a couple of kids who were reapplying in general because they wanted to get into a better college. And so that may be another reason if you want to take a gap year. And could I also answer the previous question very quickly? So my gap year, I decided to take it to get a technical skill of coding. And so that's why I went with Big Idea, because I really wanted to, like I said, I decided late. I didn't really know, like I had that rushed mindset, but because of my gap year, I learned how to code, and I've used that not only in college, but I also started a startup with some of my friends on college campus using the skills that I learned from my gap year. And so that's one of the benefits.
Awesome. So I'm going to kind of bring up a more broad topic, so feel free to answer this however you want. But just what were some of your what were some of your biggest takeaways coming out of the gap year, in terms that could be things that you learned about yourself, just things that you learned about Israel, and how did that how did that play into you joining later starting college and sorry, later starting college and playing into the maturity that you have over some of the other students. So feel, you can answer that however you want, just some of the biggest takeaways.
I think for me, knowing where I came from was very important, and learning, having the opportunity to learn, and I'm not necessarily where I came from, but like Jewishness, Judaism in general. I wasn't someone that was very knowledgeable or I guess proud of my Judaism when I was in high school. And I think while I was in Israel and I learned about the more of the background of what Judaism is, as well as the context that Israel is in, it gave me more of a clear mindset about where my relationship stands with both Judaism and Israel. And I think that was very important, and I think it's still important for me while I'm in college. So I'm not really necessarily just somebody that spits out information, but someone that is a critical thinker on the topic, and that was something that was really important.
I really looked at my gap year as a time to explore different relationships. So I was living in an apartment with 7 girls. I was sharing a room with 2 other people and like figuring out how to share space. There were different relationships of like meeting friends for the first time and like being friends with them. The relationship I have with Israel, it was really just a time to focus on like what different people, different places, different moments, like what they mean in my life in a context where like that was my focus. And like that was really valuable for me.
All right. So one thing that is unfortunately a reality in this day and age is anti-Semitism on campus. Did having this experience in Israel on your gap year program, did that first of all, like, is anti-Semitism on campus something that anyone has experienced, and how did your experience in Israel maybe help you just emotionally handle that, or help you talk about it and create some dialogue? Did that factor into that at all?
Definitely, there's been an increase at the University of Chicago of anti-Semitism, like sort of the general increase overall, but it hasn't personally affected me. It's affected some other students that I know. But when I talk with a lot of my friends are not Jewish, I have a decent amount of Jewish friends, decent amount of non-Jewish friends, and they don't really know about Israel or anything. And so my gap year has prepared me with experiences. If they have a question or they hear something in the news and they come to me, like I can try and explain it. And if like I'm talking with them and I can bring up experiences from my gap year of going to Arab cities in Israel, of like meeting different people, of getting to know really what the reality of the situation is there. And so you can really only get that exposure when you go there, as opposed to like reading it on the news or some other person's report of what's going on, which is inherently biased, as opposed to experiencing it on your own. And so I think it's really important to go and to learn while you're there. And that really has helped me talk with them.
I don't know how qualified I am to answer this question because I go to the Jewish Theological Seminary in tandem with Columbia University, but I will say that in terms of being pro-Israel and anti-Israel, I think my gap year has really, really helped me a lot. I've always loved Israel and considered myself a Zionist, but in terms of like a greater Jewish context, sometimes it's a big deal to explore what that means to a lot of people. And I feel like because of my year last year, I've been able to create a lot of space for meaningful discussion about how Israel plays into people's Jewish identities, which is not always something that comes up in conversation. And I also think it motivated me to kind of like find spaces for that conversation and create spaces for that conversation, which is so important.
I just want to enter here because we're running out of time. So just to keep us on track, in 2 minutes, there is another session, just to let everyone who's here know that I'm going to be doing a session on the details of Masa and how we play a role in applying and going on a gap year. So before we go, there was another question, Noah, that we talked about that was in the chat about traveling during the Passover time. And so first of all, I want to thank all of you for all of your answers. And we sort of ended on this heavy note, about anti-Semitism. And thank you, Becca and Joshua, for talking about it. And we could talk, I'm sure, for a lot longer and cover more of that. But I do want to just answer, because there was another question about traveling abroad. And really the issue is, it was about Passover in general, because you do get time off. But just so you know, there are multiple times throughout the year. There's also an intersession between the two sessions where GAP participants would often travel as well. The issue right now is COVID. And so that has really messed things up, because people were not able to come and go as they normally would. So just so you know, part of a gap year experience are on international trips. And so just be aware of that. And hopefully next year, we won't be talking about COVID anymore. And if that's the case, you will have more of those opportunities. So Noah, you want to close us out?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. I would love to take more questions. If you have any more questions, you can email them. Cheryl, I believe your email is in the chat if you want to post that again, so people have that email if they have any questions. You can also schedule a meeting with Cheryl. She posted the link to her Calendly. You can just go on and schedule a meeting with her if you want some more specifics. Also, please explore the Masa website for specifics about individual programs. And through the website, you can also connect to a program advisor who can speak in much more detail about any individual program. That's their full job. So please, we encourage you to do that. Thank you for everyone for attending this part of the session. And thank you, big thank you to our 4 wonderful alumni for taking all these questions and just for being here on a Sunday. So yeah, that's it for me. Happy Super Bowl Sunday to everyone. And Cheryl, I'll bring it back to you to kick off the next part
And
of the session.
hopefully, I'll see the rest of you at the next session. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.